Let's zoom in into how is it like to be a transgender in the Philippines, and relate that to what kind of impact will that decision by the WHO have on lives of transgender Filipinos?
I like talking about what it means to be trans in the Philippines because I believe really that Filipino culture is attuned to gender diversity. Before the Spaniards came, we have accounts of so-called male-bodied people who were moving in society as women. So from a modernist standpoint, we think that those people were actually the precursors of the modern trans identity in the Philippines. But with the advent of religion and colonization and Western education, that part of our history got erased. So now nobody talks about tababaylan as a phenomenon of being a spiritual leader in pre-Hispanic communities and villages in the Philippines. But you can see it if you go to the barangay in the Philippines. There is someone there who is gender diverse, someone there who is trans, who identifies as trans. Most likely that person is, the barangay beautician or a counselor or someone who everybody knows and everybody loves. So that is why we named our organization Ganda Filipinas, because in the Philippines, when you go out into the streets, or for example, you go out in public to buy something, for example, you go to Divisoria, people will call trans women as, "Uy, ganda, bili ka naman sa amin. Ganda, bili ka naman. Anong gusto mo, ganda?" And so, that tells you that Filipinos are accepting, are actually warm towards trans people. It's when you inject issues of religion or science, when the discussion takes on a different color. But people in the Philippines love trans women.
Yes,
we're everywhere in
yes,
the Philippines.
As they say, and I see your point, but as they say, diba, tolerance is one thing, genuine acceptance is another thing, equality also.
Right.
I mean, because the reality too is there's a lot of discrimination.
Right.
And the reality too is it's very different for you. I can imagine growing up in school, taking part in various activities, or even in the workplace.
I guess I don't know, I couldn't speak for Naomi, but I was very fortunate to grow up trans without a lot of bullying. I grew up I studied in an all-boys exclusive school. But there was a lot of tolerance during that time. I guess what's interesting at this moment in 2019 is that people are more connected based on social media, and so they get to discuss more, learn more about what it means to be transgender. Basically, it was easy for me, but it wasn't easy for a lot of people. And I guess, especially for those who don't look as female as we are. I guess that's where the bullying starts to happen and discrimination starts to happen. For example, we were renewing our license for psychologists, and one of our colleagues was asked to cut her hair to look like more manly. Just to fit the gender marker that was written on the license. So
Is that legal? Is that even legal?
Well, there's no law that there's no law that will stop people from discriminating you if you're trans.
Right.
That is why we're pushing for an
And then once you
anti-discrimination
have,
law.
I'm trying to imagine the day-to-day things, the little things we take for granted. Once you have that ID, diba? Then it's a different story now every time you take it out.
Right.
Diba? Because, iba yung litrato dito. Entering villages or applying for anything,
That's
diba?
true. Exactly.
What other things like that? Do we probably take for granted?
Just going to the airport, taking bathroom breaks, that's something that a lot of straight and cisgenders would take for granted. Especially that we're all very visual, I guess. If you don't look a certain femininity or masculinity, then...
we actually joke about it in the trans community. We are guilty of the crime of walking as trans. Just simply by walking visibly as trans, you get discriminated against, you experience the gravest kind of abuse, and you also experience violence. So if you remember, there was a trans woman who was murdered by a U.S. Marine in 2014. Her name is Jennifer Laude, and a lot of people, when they heard about the case, they actually sided with the U.S. Marine instead of their fellow Filipino who was just murdered. So in the Philippines, in spite of the fact that there are claims that the culture is attuned to gender diversity, there is also so much discrimination and stigmatization and marginalization within the trans community.